This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
Thank you guys so much for showing up. I have to let everybody know I have my back went out on a rope swing 2 days ago. So, excuse me if I look like I'm in pain here. It's not because I'm not enjoying being here. It's just that I have to move around a little bit. So, I was going to show you guys some clips of the film. I don't know if anyone's familiar with any of the previous work I've done out of the blue or not. But I can say that this film was never a concept. It just... I kind of went with the roller coaster ride that happened a couple of years ago. And it went from revamping Out of the Blue to completely making an entirely new film. And I'm really, really proud of it. It almost killed me and everybody else involved. I had partners drop out. I had to raise money to buy people out and having to raise capital of hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget and credit card debt up to my eyeballs, and had to keep moving, had to keep pushing forward because you're invested several years and several $100,000 of borrowed money, and there's no stopping, there's no turning back. You've got to make it work. And so we went back to the drawing board on a couple of occasions, and we really feel like we got it right this time. So I'm excited to show some clips of the film. But if you guys probably know more than what you'd like to discuss. But I think perhaps we should just show a few of the clips right up front, and then we could take a break and we can discuss some of the aspects of the film, and then I can show you some more clips after that, if that's what you guys are up to. Any questions? Yeah? Should we get right to it? Sure. Cool.
I jumped out of the way. I said, oh my God, this plane's going to crash.
Came right across, north to south of...
Incidentally, I was a private pilot, so I have some familiarity with air.
It glided over my house, and there was...
We saw what I thought to be a kind of a boomerang shape.
Oh my God, that's a wingspan. I've never seen anything like that.
They were reported by at least one commercial airline pilot.
It was humongous, that's all I can say.
It passed right in front of us, just about right above eye's length.
No, I don't hear anything. What in the hell is that?
It's wide.
I came out second after Monica, and I remember looking at it. It was coming over the mountain, and it was like almost as wide as one of the humps, and it was very low.
It's coming across the sky, and as it's moving, it's blocking and unblocking the stars. There is actually a shape.
It was more like a boomerang than like a straight V. And then the lights were spaced pretty evenly.
It was actually 5 lights that were a V, 1 in front and 2 on each side, and it was perfect. It was a perfect triangle.
If you can imagine something the size of Camelback Mountain floating down Scottsdale Road, you have some idea of the intensity of this thing.
The object we saw, if we opened up a newspaper, you could not block out the object that we saw.
People say, Mike, now you saw a B-2 bomber. My response was, we could land all 40 of our B-2 bombers on the wing of that craft.
You know, it's one of the biggest things I've ever seen that moved like that. I mean, it was just enormous.
It happened last night, and eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
I don't know if it was as big as an aircraft carrier. It might have been. Because I've never seen an aircraft carrier fly.
Barely missed that mountain.
Really?
Yeah, came floating over the mountain.
So had you not looked up, you wouldn't have known it was
No,
there?
my daughter, it was 8:30 at night. My daughter was coming over here, and she ran in and said, Mom, you have got to see this. So we all...
There was such an uproar about what people described seeing that we also did a story about it back in 1997.
The first report of a strange flying object came at about 8:20 that night.
from a former police officer in Paulden, Arizona. Over the next 40 minutes, people gave similar reports of an object along a 200-mile route south to Phoenix and Tucson.
It was gunmetal black. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't invisible, it was more of a dull bluish black color.
And we both just stayed there and looked at it for a couple minutes, and it was completely silent.
When you look down the street on a hot day in Phoenix, above the street's like it's really wavy, and you see everything kind of distorted, and that's what it looked like up inside the middle of the craft.
It was just gliding, and then it stopped, and then it the sides retracted a little, and then it was gone.
Just went.
Acceleration to deceleration, it was no noise the whole time.
And not a sound.
Explanations have been tossed about that they were flares, that there were planes flying in formation. But Mark and Robin, we checked with the FAA today, we checked with Sky Harbor, and we checked with Luke Air Force Base, and there's been no official explanation of those strange bright lights last night.
I'm going to order a full, investigation of this through DPS. We're going to make all the necessary inquiries, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to find out if it was a UFO.
I'm Patty Kirkpatrick. Remember those mysterious lights in the sky? Well, the governor says there are new leads in the case. Good evening, Arizona. Governor is holding a news conference on the lights in the sky over Phoenix in March. Let's listen in.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. And don't get him too close to me, please. It's, This just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
I think what really irritated me was the joke the governor pulled with the Martian. I just didn't have time for that kind of stuff.
He was just dismissing everything that these people had seen and said, just like we're all Looney Tunes.
And I know what I saw, and that's not what you're telling me what I saw. I didn't see flares. I didn't see A-10 Warthog. So how about we work together and try to figure out what this thing is?
So when you hear someone says they saw a UFO, you think they're crazy?
Yes, I think they're crazy, yes.
What puzzles me is why people laugh at the subject of UFOs, but when the laughter stops, everyone secretly wants to know, are they real?
You see that now? See that big one? See it going? Do you see it?
Get with this.
Jesus.
I don't know if I want to know if UFOs are real, because then that raises a lot of other issues. Who are they? Why are they here? Are they going to hurt me? Do they have chocolate?
When I told my father I wanted to make a documentary about UFOs, he said I was crazy. In fact, my whole family did. And 95% of the time, this stuff is crazy. But the remaining 5%, that is what keeps me going.
This man in the saucer, can you describe him?
What year was this taken, dude? I'm James Fox, and I've been curious about UFOs for a long time.
And if you look down at the very bottom, there's the little disc.
Very curious. Evidently, the Air Force is curious too.
In pursuit of this obligation,
And in 1952, they admitted it.
we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
All blacked out?
Wonder what was under there.
With the help of investigative reporter Leslie Kane, I decided to put together some of the best witnesses from around the world for this film.
Almost 10 years after the termination of Project Blue Book.
The cases and photographs you are about to see represent some of the best evidence that UFOs are real.
So what time are we actually going on the air, or did the
I think 6 o'clock, you guys.
I hear the same question over and over. If UFOs are real, then surely someone in the know would be talking.
Good evening. A historic occasion will take place in Washington on Monday. Former high-level government employees, military officials, and pilots from all over the world will come together They'll discuss their own UFO sightings and encounters, and they'll do it at the National Press Club in the nation's capital. This group has gathered together to call on the United States government to take an active role in investigating cases involving unidentified flying objects. James Fox, will you be there Monday too?
Absolutely, yes. To establish the fact that the phenomenon is real and it's happening worldwide.
Fife, are we now saying that the United States is taking this seriously, or is this just an event?
I think the United States is taking it seriously, and they need to. It's long overdue.
And you're going to moderate it, right?
I'm going to moderate it.
I'm Fife Symington. In 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
Before this event, I met with the governor at his home to find out why he ridiculed the sighting.
We were in the middle of investigating it and just couldn't get any answers. Paralleling that activity was this almost hysterical environment that was building, the hysteria that was building.
The governor told me what was actually going on behind the scenes.
And we called Luke Air Force Base, and we called the FAA, and I called various touch base with people. I called my general at the National Guard. Nobody had an explanation. People just sort of said, well, we just don't know what it is.
Phoenix Councilwoman Frances Barwood was one of the only elected representatives willing to push for an investigation.
I would have thought that they would have wanted to do an investigation, but apparently they would rather ignore it. I don't know why.
At Barwood's request, Senator John McCain looked into the matter personally.
We asked the Air Force to look into it, and this was the first response that we've gotten. We're going to go back and ask them to look at it again.
Senator McCain wrote letters to both the National Archives and the Air Force. Both claimed not to have jurisdiction over such matters.
I was kind of surprised at that response. But there are people who said they saw things, and whenever that happens, they deserve at least an investigation, it seems to me.
The Air Force explanation eventually provided to Senator McCain was military flares dropped from A-10 Warthogs between 9:30 and 10 p.m.
Oh my God!
I hit pay dirt, finally.
According to some analysts, these lights captured on film were flares.
Well, that is a totally different configuration than we've ever seen before.
Yep.
But this does not account for the large boomerang-shaped object seen by the governor and hundreds, possibly thousands of others across the state beginning several hours earlier.
I mean, it clearly had a shape to it, and a big shape. And it was a constant shape. And you can't control flares that way. There's just no way they were flares.
Why can't they tell us? I mean, what's it going to hurt? I would like for them to come out and say, that's top secret and we're not going to tell you what it was.
I was only able to find one video taken of the earlier sightings. I was, however, given this video taken by an Army colonel a few years earlier. It reminds me of what Arizona witnesses described seeing.
There's no sound, and it's not planes flying in formation. I don't hear anything, do you?
No, I don't hear anything. What in the hell is that?
Can you see the stars? Can you see through it? Right behind it.
Yeah, I see it now.
And that's not planes flying in formation behind it either. It's another triangle.
What would you say to the people about it?
I'd say I saw an unidentified flying object of massive proportions float over the city of Phoenix and Scottsdale, and I don't have the damnedest clue what it was.
I saw it. It was over my house. I saw it for 5 minutes. It wasn't something that was a flash that I only saw for a second. Could it have been? I know what I saw. And I get very upset, and I was wondering why they won't find out what it was.
Well, I'd like now to set the record straight. I never meant to ridicule anyone. My office did make inquiries as to the origin of the craft,
but to this day they remain unanswered. I still don't know what it was. As a pilot and a former Air Force officer, I can definitively say that this craft did not resemble any man-made object that I'd ever seen. Well, I now know that I'm not alone in witnessing something extraordinary. That's the bottom line. There are many high-ranking military, aviation, and government officials, many of whom are here today, who share my concerns. Some of them have truly exceptional stories to tell.
Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet, powerful beaming spotlights, moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds.
Physical traces on the ground from the craft were confirmed by the local police. The official conclusion of Japan in 1979 was that about 15% of the cases remained unidentified after careful analysis by our experts.
Fue entonces que me acerqué a 100 metros del objeto. Tenía unos 10 metros de diámetro, estaba como esmaltado con una cúpula de color crema sobre una base metálica ancha y circular. No tenía motores, ni escapes, ni ventanas, ni alas o antenas. Carecía de todos los implementos típicos de un avión y sin ningún sistema visible de propulsión.
Lamentablemente, el tema relacionado con los ovnis se encuentra muy contaminado y con una importante cantidad de información falsa.
Most UFO sightings turned out to be misidentifications of things such as aircraft, satellites and meteors, but in around 5% of cases no explanation could be found.
Washington, D.C. is no stranger to this story.
Could these saucers be some kind of a secret weapon of ours? No. If they were, Air Materiel Command would be the first to know. How about a device from a foreign country? We know they're not. What is your opinion, Colonel?
The U.S. Air Force's involvement with UFOs started back in World War II when pilots reported being followed by luminous orbs. They were nicknamed Foo Fighters. By 1947, flying saucer sightings were getting national coverage.
They flew erratically like a saucer would if you skipped it across the water.
According to this memo titled Opinion Concerning Flying Discs by General Nathan Twining, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious.
It just come up like that and then it tipped and just, really went. It didn't have no smoke, no motor, just the wind. It went fast. I've never seen anything go so fast in my life as that thing went. Yeah.
The sightings over Washington in July 1952 were just part of one of the biggest and most impressive UFO waves in all UFO history.
This incident was witnessed by the public, military pilots, and air traffic control.
The pilots went aloft. They saw a luminous glowing object out in front of them, right where the radar indicated it to be. So you had ground radar, airborne radar, and the pilots' visual sightings.
Look magazine reported that radar operators at Washington National Airport tracked UFOs at speeds up to 7,000 miles per hour.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
Major General Sanford, who was the Director of Information of the Air Force, called a press conference, which was characterized at the time as being the largest press conference since World War II.
The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
Did the Joint Chiefs of Staff talk to you or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on, flying saucers, and they've had other things.
There were senior Air Force generals convinced that we had interplanetary visitors. And they were setting the policy, and they were behind the Life magazine article of, I believe, April 1952, which was titled, "Do We Have Interplanetary Visitors?" And you read the story, the answer obviously was yes.
1952 was the end of government openness.
In my opinion, I think they were worried that it would panic the public if they knew that someone had vehicles that had this kind of performance, way back right after World War II, period of time. So they started telling lies about it.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek investigated UFOs for the United States Air Force for over 22 years. The most well-known of these investigations was Project Blue Book.
Where media is not...
In this 1979 interview, Dr. Hynek revealed why the Air Force changed its public position.
They were strongly guided by the CIA, because the CIA was not concerned so much with UFOs as they were with UFO reports. They were afraid, actually, that if another nation wanted to perpetrate another Pearl Harbor, that if their agents spawned a bunch of false flying saucer stories that might clog the military wires, as actually happened in 1952. So they devised the so-called Robertson panel, of which I was an associate member at the time. A very prestigious panel. I was one of the lower-ranking ones. They had Nobel Prize winners and whatnot on it. But at any rate, they handed down the dictum, which then became sort of the unwritten law of the Air Force: don't rock the boat, play it down, cool it, don't get the public excited.
What is your answer to the people who are sure there are spaceships and they say that you and the Air Force are in cahoots?
Well, first of all, this business about being in cahoots is just simply a downright falsehood.
And I know, having been in Blue Book for nearly 20 years, that whenever an interesting case came up, the very last thing in the world they would do is to notify the media. And when the media themselves found out something, the Air Force did its best to play it down. It's called it a balloon, called it a star, called it...
Balloons, meteors, satellites, aircraft seen with the sun glinting off of them, and birds.
Our critics continually charge that the United States Air Force is withholding information from the general public on this subject. This is absolutely untrue.
And there is nothing in the records which would indicate that we have been visited by any advanced civilization.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
Good evening. Reports of flying saucers are nothing new.
When it got to the top of the trees, it stopped.
So it looked like a round disc.
Residents of the area saw it. The police saw it. Sergeant Newell Schneider of the Sheriff's Office remembered it well enough to draw it.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is. The Air Force sent its chief scientific consultant on UFOs, Professor J. Allen Hynek, to check the Michigan sightings.
A little bit of swamp light appears here, it goes out, another one appears over here, that goes out then, but the illusion as viewed from a distance is that the objects have moved back and forth.
The citizens of Michigan didn't buy it and asked then Congressman Gerald Ford to investigate.
Mr. Ford, what about flying saucers? You've had some in Michigan in the past week. Do you really believe in flying saucers? You've called for a congressional investigation.
Dave, we've had several incidents in Michigan in the last week, incidents that many reliable, good citizens felt were sufficient to justify some action by our government, and not the kind of flippant answer that was given by the Air Force where they passed it off as a swamp gas.
Now, this is not an attack on the Air Force spokesman or the project spokesman. They are simply following orders to explain away all UFO sightings as quickly as possible when they become public and deny that UFOs really exist.
scientists were being misled, even as the public was being misled. And to this day, most scientists have no inkling of the serious hardcore evidence because now it's all treated like a tabloid subject.
Are you sorry now that you did tell people what you saw?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry because not that it's not the truth, but it's just the idea, the reaction of the people. They think you're a nut. To tell you the truth, that's just what they figure you are. And I'm not going to take it no more. I don't want nobody down in here. I just leave me alone. And if the thing lands right there by that pump, I'd never say a word.
10 years ago, in 1969, they closed Blue Book, and I thought for a while that maybe this was finally going to be over. But since that time, we've had about 25,000 more UFO reports.
Many of the hundreds of people reporting the sightings believe they've all seen the same object.
It's called the Hudson Valley UFO.
When I walked away from it, at that point, it started to rotate virtually.
Not quite.
I'm going to tell you something, honey. I don't know what the hell it is. It moved in a very straight line, very slowly. There was absolutely no noise.
There was not a sound.
And it moved smoothly?
Very smoothly, almost like it was floating. It was silent, it was hovering. I mean, airplanes can't hover.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Personally, no, sir.
How do you know that you're not being used? How do you know that you know the full story when you stand up?
My name is Gary Tuckman with CNN, and this question's for the governor and Mr. Callahan. This really is a government that doesn't mind scaring us. We still have orange alerts and red alerts, and they scare us all the time. It keeps people in work. So I'm wondering why you think, and you just state that that's the reason and that's it. Was that really the motivation for a government that doesn't mind scaring us?
If these phenomena are as technologically advanced as they appear to be, then one could say that we're completely vulnerable as a civilization. And that's, to some people, that might be horrifying. And I'm just speculating on that feeling of vulnerability. And so a lot of people like to say, well, you know, we're not vulnerable. That's just not true. That didn't happen. And they shut it out of their minds.
And Wilfred de Brouwer, a retired general as well.
The night before our big event at the National Press Club, we all met for dinner.
Certainly one of the people that I spoke to was...
So I wanted to put, and a lot of it is somewhat familiar to a lot of the people in the UFO community or people that are aware of what's going on, but I'm not trying to create a body of work for them. I'm trying to create a body of work of some of the best evidence, some of the best historical stuff that we've got that can be presented to mainstream in a digestible fashion. And so that is why I took a collection of some of the best stuff and I put it down into, I think it's like 7 minutes of history, some of the most compelling stuff that went down. And I consider Hynek, I mean, the fact that we got that interview from him that sat on a shelf for 30 years, to come forward. I mean, you know, people know who Hynek is. I mean, he coined the phrase close encounter. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was based on his work at Blue Book for the Air Force. So the fact that he would, you know, do a 180, as you all, I'm sure, are perfectly aware. But I did that because I wanted mainstream to realize that this has been going on, this pattern. Like, because people often always say, oh, well, UFO, you know, it's obviously misidentified aircraft or it's some secret military aircraft. I'm like, no. What truly defines a UFO is something that has the ability, and it has been doing so since late 40s, possibly, obviously before that, but certainly the modern day UFO sightings, late 30s, 40s, to hover without disturbing any air, without making any sound, without any wings, any tail, accelerate from a standstill to out of sight in the blink of an eye, without making a sonic boom or anything like that. And that has been consistent for over 60 years, and I really wanted to demonstrate that in this piece, and that's why I did that little 7-minute snapshot history in the middle of the whole thing, because the entire film pretty much revolves around the National Press Club event that we did in 2007, and that was just done to highlight out of the blue. And then it sort of kept evolving, and we kept getting sort of more media coverage. And everyone kept saying, "Oh, we love this revamped version of Out of the Blue," which I was very excited about. We put so many years into it. But if you could just do this, this, and this, we think we got a real good chance. I'm thinking, I'm out of steam here, you know. But we went back to the drawing board for another couple of years, and then the birth of this film happened. So, are there any questions? I thought we were going to take a.
Yeah, how far back in history do UFO sightings go?
Well, as far as I know, since the dawn of time. but I mean, I covered some of this stuff back 10 years ago in a film I did, UFOs: 50 Years of Denial, where they had cave paintings and frescoes and stuff like that from thousands of years ago. But I mean, you know, Von Gannikin would be the person to read up on that. I don't really specialize in that, but I just know that long time, seems like it.
I have a second question. That is to do with daytime sightings. Most of the sightings that are quoted are often during nighttime and they're light, and it's very difficult to discern shapes and stuff. Are there any really nice, beautiful daytime shots?
Daytime shots?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's the Trent photographs, and I showed a couple in here just now, crystal clear, multiple witnesses, several photographs, broad daylight, points of reference.
Those are small round discs.
The discs, yeah, I don't know exactly how far away it was, but yeah. So yeah, there's been photographs of, and that's another thing the myth that people seem to have is that there's no real solid evidence. Well, there are lots of photographs that have been taken. Of course, if any one of them was proven to be real, then it would have to prove that UFOs are real. Therefore, there's always going to be the skeptic that says that's bogus. And no matter how good the photograph is, no matter how many witnesses, unless, of course, you know, it was a football stadium and it landed in the middle of a game and they had, you know, yeah, but, you know, you kind of wonder why that doesn't happen. But, you know, I mean, but it's been amazing, actually. I mean, like the Phoenix case, a lot of mainstream people don't know about. I mean, people's jaw drop when they see that whole section. It's like, why didn't I hear about that? You know, how could something of that magnitude fly over a city, actually the whole state of Arizona, and be investigated behind the scenes by the governor, the local Air Force Base, Luke Air Force Base, the senator, the former Councilwoman Frances Barber? They all investigated that case. Senator McCain got the runaround. The Governor Fife Symington told me he got the runaround. He called up the people at the Pentagon, they just shrugged their shoulders. We don't know what that thing was. You know? Oh, sure, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions?
How did you get so curious or passionate about this subject?
Well, I remember I had a little sighting years and years ago, and that I didn't base any of what I feel to be true today on that, but that sort of triggered a curiosity. And I remember setting out, my father's a mainstream journalist, and I told him and along the list of the, I'm going to do this, you know, I'm looking into this. Really? You know, don't waste your life kind of thing, you know. And that sort of fueled, because I'm very tenacious, I'm a Taurus, so when people told me I can't do it, then it was like, oh, okay. So that was actually good that happened. And then I produced one film, which took me almost 5 years, and I had no intentions of doing a second one. And then I got invited to some additional interviews, and then 5 years later, Out of the Blue happened. And then we went to just revamp Out of the Blue. I was working on an alternative energy project when this thing sparked. So it just kind of, I've been along for the ride, let's put it that way. Yeah, please.
Did you get any government money for the investigation?
For this latest one?
Not necessarily the latest one, but just to prove that flying saucers exist kind of thing?
No, never asked.
It surprises me in a way, because as long as people are investigating their existence, you're proving that it hasn't been seen or it isn't real. And for me, I know many people who saw it as real as an airplane or anything else. And
well,
to actually be investigating it as if you don't know that they exist or not, okay, that may be good for people who don't have any contact with it. But if you've really had contact with it, it's a waste of time. You should be asking questions like, why are they here?
Well, it's interesting you say that. There's two, I'll mention something very quickly. I went to Russia in '99, and I had an interpreter, and we sat down with this admiral, and his first thing was I didn't ask anything. His first thing was told my interpreter, if he's here to talk about whether UFOs exist or not, the door's right over there. He's like, I'm here to talk about the implications. I only invited this guy in. Yeah, isn't that funny? So, yeah, oh yeah. But here's the interesting thing that's happening. I discovered in the making of this film, of course they always suspected this was the case, but every single general I talked to, every major case, every pilot, Iran, Belgium, France, Russia, wherever it is, they all said to me, on camera or off camera, right after the sighting, there was a representative from the U.S. Air Force or government that was investigating this case, and yet when you ask them what's going on, their standard template response is, we don't investigate, so the termination of Blue Books in 1969, which is an outright lie, and I could prove that. It's like they're totally, completely lying to us about it.
The idea of Blue Book being terminated, it never began.
Yeah, well, that was all, yeah.
The sighting I saw in Tokyo, when I saw the Blue Book report, the Blue Book was report that a UFO was spotted over Tokyo. And of course, hundreds of people reported it. But the UFO that I saw was orange, and if you held your hands up, it was that big around. It was coming down straight, no noise. Then it gave a blue shock around its rim, completely around its rim. And that was the only noise it made. It was a buzzing pop sound, and it started going in a circle. And then it made that same buzzing pop sound on one end of it and became a streak of light. And that was reported in Blue Book as a sighting over Tokyo.
Well, I mean, Hynek himself says, I mean, his job basically was to give a prosaic explanation when there clearly wasn't a prosaic. Oh, I'm so sorry. Carry on, yes.
Because there were three of us, my older brother and a Japanese friend, and we started running toward our house, and suddenly an explosion, a big sonic boom. Now this was back in the early 50s, and the only airplane that could make a sonic boom at that time was the F-86. And the other surprising thing is it's Tokyo, and we could actually see this thing, because usually in Tokyo it's cloudy, and you couldn't see a thing normally. But this was a clear night and no moon. And with that sonic boom, it was like a Model T trying to follow a Mercedes.
Interesting. What was the...
So I'm just wondering, did anybody ever have him land, and did you get an interview with any of the occupants?
I deliberately, although I have spoken to a number of people who claim to have had close encounters of the third kind, as Dr. Hynek would refer to it as, or coined the phrase, but I've steered clear of that in the piece, only because I felt that I would be more likely for me to have people of stature, government and military, would be more willing to come on board with what we're doing if we didn't go into the occupants. So that's, although I've been in touch with people like Travis Walton and the Allagash Five, and I've been investigating the case that happened in, I think it was in '95 in Rua, Zimbabwe. Very fascinating, where occupants and stuff like that happened, but I don't mention any of that in the piece. But we allude to that in very somewhat discreetly. Did you have a question? Sorry, was that you? No, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So the general that you talked to, the Russian general, and any of the other generals, did they have any thoughts about why the UFOs are here, or what? They obviously believe it's not an issue for them. They're here. So did they talk about their hypothesis about why they're here?
They gave me the impression that we're under some sort of observation.
That's
Yeah.
not all they would say?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Maybe we're like...
Has there been any suggestion that high-level government people or shadow government people or anybody human has negotiations or conversations or strategies, some kind of liaison?
Oh, kind of like with the Pale Horse by William Cooper. He goes into that a little bit. But I just skim the surface, quite honestly. I hear stuff kind of behind the scenes, but I only base what I report on whatever I can back up, and I just, that would just be a total speculation and conjecture, and I just can't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm yeah.
In your film, do you go over what happened to presidential candidate Cheney when he said he believed in UFOs?
He's in the movie.
Is he?
Yeah, he's in the movie, and it's very interesting actually, because when in the midst of production, timing is everything, and it was just like a fluke how things all unraveled in from 2007 to now, and during production the French started to release their files. You guys remember hearing about that? So because of some national news coverage that we got an invitation to come and meet with people at CNES, It's the French equivalent of NASA, and they're the ones responsible for releasing, I think it was 60 years of files. And then the British followed suit, and we documented all this in the movie. You know, it's like as we were filming, this was all going down. So we flew to France, and then we went to England, and we got to meet these people that released this stuff. It was incredible how it all happened. Please.
Is there any actual evidence that links crop circles to UFOs?
You know,
I'm trying to think it's a different phenomenon.
Yeah, I don't touch on that at all. No. Sorry, is that?
Going on the camera's pointing on me, but
Right.
anybody else. But I'm kind of wondering if you would ask the group how many have seen something they couldn't explain?
Well.
And not to hear all our stories,
Yeah.
but just to see how prevalent it is. Show a curiosity.
So yeah, we won't go into each and every case here, but she wants to know how many people in the room have seen a UFO.
No, I see something they couldn't.
See, that's all it is, unidentified flying object. Maybe a landed object. So what do we got about a third of the, no, a little less than a third, about a third, looks like? About a third of the people in here? Yeah, ish, yeah.
And so, who would you talk about? You know, I've often wondered that. I saw something I would have liked to have, if not investigated, at least talk to somebody about. So who do you talk to?
Well, that's interesting. I remember a lot of people. First of all, one of the myths that I'd like to dispel right now is that people say, "Oh, well, you're just trying to make money." First of all, witnesses don't even want to come forward. And I had to work so hard on getting access to people. People have no idea about that. These witnesses don't want to. A lot of these witnesses don't want to come forward. I had to work at them and get their respect and their trust. And that took years. I mean, years. Some of the interviews took me 5, 6, 7 years to get in here. And it's a compilation. This film's a collection of, you'll see me in my 20s and 30s in this movie. I mean, this has been going on for forever. And I put kind of all the best stuff together, and that's kind of what it ended up being, But yeah, dispel the myth that it's very difficult to make money on it. Like I say, I'll open up my bank accounts and show anyone, you think I'm getting rich on this? Come take a look. But yet also the fact that people, it's difficult to get people to come forward and discuss it because anytime they do, they get laughed at, generally speaking, right? And they're under fire, and the people don't like to generally draw that sort of attention to themselves. It definitely has a stigma. But things are starting to change. They're definitely starting to change, especially in the mainstream media. I mean, I remember one case where we were all on the panel at Larry King, and we went to a commercial break, and it was myself, the governor, a colonel, and an airman, and went to commercial break, and Larry's kind of sitting there, and he's like, kind of looks over at the governor, and he goes, "This stuff's kind of maybe real, huh?" The governor's like, "Yeah, I definitely, saw this thing. A lot of my constituents did," and he's kind of sitting there with this sort of look like, God, like, the mainstream had been duped. And I know a lot of behind the scenes, there's been a lot of interest with CNN and stuff like that. So.
Did the governor say why he did the alien head thing? I mean, like was that his idea or whose idea?
It was it's really funny actually because he went out, as we found out 10 years later, and he's a captain in the Air Force. He's a pilot. And he went out into the night sky and he saw this thing, okay? So he knew there was all this hoopla going on, and requests were pouring in from across the state. And I know that Francis Barwood's office was inundated with requests. And apparently the phone lines lit up, and this was going on. And then a story broke in USA Today, and he started getting calls from all around the world. And he said it was just like, all right, I got to curb this panic or interest. And so that was the solution. But it's interesting that he himself felt that it was not of Earth origin, and yet that's what. And behind the scenes, he was trying to get answers, and he wasn't getting anywhere. And sort of front of the scenes, he.
I was just curious. Yeah, like you said, your plans.
He came up with it. They had a little conference, a little conference with him and his staff, and they're like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. Yeah, and he got his chief of staff to dress up in this alien suit, which apparently he did not want to do. He's like, well, I'll end up being known for just that, and it's pretty much true, Sorry.
There's several, very interesting facts
related to that Phoenix sighting, of the first one there, that you didn't mention, and I wondered if you knew about it. One was that the U.S. spy satellite that was closest to that area
Burned out or something like that?
off and sent a fax saying, turn itself off to an American computer company to build it.
Mike Fortson's been telling me a lot about that, yeah.
Yeah, that guy who runs that American computer company, he's been on the Coast to Coast radio many times. He'll talk about that to you, he'll tell you every single thing about it. And then his office was broken into, and he's got the super high-tech cross laser beams and everything on the carpets and sound detectors. And somehow somebody get in there and get something out of his files in the middle of the night and all that stuff.
Well, there's also an interview with and there's a lot of stuff that didn't make it in here that I really wanted to get in, but I wasn't sure at what point, how much do we really need? I don't know. It's some of it seemed kind of touchy, but there's an interview as well with one of the guys that pulled the pilot of an F-16, I believe it was an F-16 or F-15, out of the cockpit after he'd been scrambled to intercept this thing. And that's incredible. I mean, the guy, apparently the pilot couldn't even walk. I mean, he was just like, he came up on this thing the size of a gnat. He said it was like 2 miles across. And as he approached it, he said that thing just gone, just left the area, was just gone in the blink of an eye. Which all the witnesses said that thing flew.
That same night, a few hours later, in the middle of the night, was when they hustled President Clinton on his golfing trip.
Right. He ended up in the hospital with an injury.
Went down the back steps and wound up in the hospital. Now, if you put that in there, it makes it a different level to the whole thing.
I know, but until I have Clinton coming forward to do, it's like.
Well, somebody knows that firsthand.
Yeah.
I don't know who.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, I heard about that too.
On DEF-3 or
DEFCON 3, yeah. DEFCON 3, yeah.
Our airspace is invaded. We can't do anything about it.
I met a guy at the Luke Air Force Base. This is in like '99, and funny, it was a friend of mine, and it was her boyfriend worked at the base, and we were having a cocktail party, and I was like, well, he's worked there. Was he there in '97? Yeah, he knows some things. Right? So I approached him, and he was so tight-lipped, he didn't want to talk to me, and just shut me down right there on the spot. And about 2 hours later, he had a couple drinks in him. I'm not kidding you. I sat at this party, and he like walks over to me, and he looks at me, and he goes, just so you know, we went to DEFCON 3 that night. And I said, DEFCON 3, what's that? He goes, we were being invaded. And he goes, good luck with this story. I'm not saying anything more, and that was it. So I knew that from him on the base, it went to DEFCON 3. So when I heard that would indicate that if we do go to DEFCON 3, the president would indeed be informed. That's his protocol. So when I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense that happened.
One more thing is that President Clinton sent his defense secretary more or less secretly to Phoenix and was there almost a week. And he sent Hillary to Phoenix and she was there almost a week. They went on separate airplanes. And he sent a third person, I can't remember right now, more or less secretly. Because if he went, the press would be all over. But he sent them, didn't tell anybody where they were going, and they spent all this time. And that was maybe one reason that it didn't get into the national news until 9 months later.
I was so funny because I interviewed a guy, an airman that was at an English base in 1980 for the Bentwaters case. You guys are probably familiar with the landing of a craft. And he actually worked at Luke Air Force Base, and he said, look, I don't know what happened really that night, but I do know that there were very secret planes flying in from Washington into our base that night. So there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And Governor Symington was kept out of the loop for the most part. What do you guys want to do? Do you guys want to take a little break? Were you guys supposed to take a little break? And then we can watch a couple more clips, and we can discuss a little bit more at the end? Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. Nobody wanted to get the last question? We're good? All right, we'll take a break. We're going to do this. Are you in or not? And so I think it was like 4 months of 24/7, all night long. I mean, it was ridiculous to put the thing on. We pull it off. We get national news coverage, which was a whole nother story about how that all went down. And then I'm at the dinner party on the evening of the 7th or the 12th, was it? Or in any case, we pulled it off, got the media coverage. Everyone showed up. Went to the National Press Club, and that evening we're all going out to dinner, and I'd been up for like 24 hours straight, all excited to spend some time with some of the people that were there at the press club. We'd flown them in from all around the world, and a lot of them were leaving the next day, or the day after the next. But anyways, for one occasion, we're all at dinner together, and I get a phone call from CNN, and it's Anderson Cooper people wanting me to go on Anderson Cooper, and I couldn't pass that up. But I was exhausted, and I really wanted to spend the time having some wine and enjoying being with all these people that we'd flown in. So I gave that whole thing up to go on this interview, and I'm on my way out there to do it, and Fife Symington is telling me, the former governor of Arizona, because he's been kind of coaching me a little bit on how to deal with media, and he goes, you stick to you have something you want to say, and you stick to it, you know. So it's funny, I just wanted to give that sort of prelude, because when you see it, you'll see the other guy try to cut me off, the debunker try to cut me off, and I very politely, as Symington had recommended, very politely but very firmly kept pushing my point. And I kind of wanted to share that with you. But the other thing I was going to mention is that this has got that sighting that happened in Texas, Stephenville, Texas. And that was really interesting, because I was in Phoenix in January of 2008 with a film crew doing some follow-up interviews for this film on that big craft that flew over Phoenix in 1997. And then we find out, breaking news, that this major UFO sighting occurred over Stephenville of a very similar craft. So we had plans to go to Chicago. We canceled all those plans because we were going to investigate the O'Hare case, and we flew to Stephenville, and this is what the case was. So we were all ready to go. We got there the day after it happened with the whole film crew and everything. So you'll get to see that in this case, which is just totally lucky, really. It was not planned at all. Yeah, right. So anyway, so I'm going to show you guys those two scenes. I think it's like 15 or 20 minutes long or something, and then we can talk a little bit afterwards.
And we don't take sides on 360. We like to present you with facts and information from different angles and let you make up your own minds about things. That's particularly true with mysteries. And for many Americans, there's no mystery greater than UFOs. James Fox helped organize today's UFO-related event in Washington. He joins me now, along with astronomer, former Air Force pilot and skeptic, James McGahey. Thanks for being with us, both of you. What this panel is calling for is essentially some sort of government investigation of it. Why shouldn't there be further investigation?
Well, there have been investigations, and it was... Well, hang on a second. Let me just state this clearly. One of the things you keep interrupting me, sir, please. One of the things I want to mention very quickly is that the official position from the Air Force is that they terminated Project Blue Book in 1969, and there have been no official investigations since then. However, we found evidence to suggest the contrary. On a number of cases in Tehran, the general said the Americans were making discrete inquiries about the case there, as well as Bentwaters, England. The colonel said that the OSI came in and investigated that case.
So you believe there is a government investigation going on, you just want it more public?
They're making discrete inquiries, unofficially, yes.
Well, UFOs are basically a modern space-age mythology. It's a conspiracy wrapped in superstition and myth.
Where does this superstition and myth come from? And how could it be so pervasive?
Within a few months of the original saucer report, practically everyone in America was conscious of flying saucers.
Oh, there's an alien who's trying to kill me.
Now, did you see a UFO?
I did, and the rest of the account, it was unidentified flying object, okay? It's like, and so, wait.
You gotta be kidding. And then I would say, where was it? What did it look like? What were you doing? How much had you had before you saw it?
It was probably some other satellite or a fast-moving airplane that they saw. I wouldn't believe them.
I mean, I know there's been sightings, random, not well documented.
Well, Jay Leno once asked, if these extraterrestrials are so highly evolved, how come it is that they only address people named Bubba who are out hunting and fishing?
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Wilfried de Brouwer. I'm a retired Major General of the Belgian Air Force, and I was Chief Operations in the Air Staff at the time that an exceptional UFO wave took place over Belgium.
The nature of this sighting was such that people identify a large triangular platform with very intensive spotlights and also hovering, being static at a certain moment, being able to fly at very low speeds and then accelerating to very high speeds in seconds. In addition, these objects didn't make any noise. It was only a humming noise.
Were there ever any inquiries from the American government to the Belgian Air Force regarding unidentified flying objects?
Yes. Well, some informal inquiries, but nothing formal. I would have liked to see a formal request. But some people came to my office and asked about this phenomenon and also what we thought about it. And asked to have a copy of a video which was taken by one of the aircraft which tried to intercept one of these objects. And I said, yes, you can have a copy, providing there is a formal request. And we never received a formal request.
544, Roger, I do have a primary contact now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Ray Bowyer, and I fly a civilian airliner as captain. I've been invited here due to my sighting last April of multiple as yet unidentified objects over the Channel Islands region of the English Channel.
Thanks for joining us. Pilots and aircraft passengers have confirmed sightings of a large unidentified flying object off the coast of Guernsey. The mysterious shapes were spotted earlier in the week and are described as a long, motionless object that measured up to a mile wide.
Hello, 544, zone pass message.
Do you have any traffic, can't really say how far, but by 12 o'clock level? Roger, I've got a very bright object, well, didn't say how far, extremely bright, yellow-orange object, straight ahead, very flat platform. We're looking at it through binoculars as we speak.
Hello, 544, Roger, I do have a primary contact now, very faint primary contact, just to the left, probably you're 11 o'clock this time, in a range of about 4 trap miles.
Roger. I've got a definite contact by 12 o'clock. Very bright yellow object looking, well, like a cigar.
Jersey Bladder 832, the zone asked us to look if we could see an object which is being seen by A-Line at the moment. We've got something about 8 o'clock resembling the description.
Roger, and 832, Roger, what range would you estimate that target?
Around about the similar range to Alderney from us now.
Well, looking through binoculars as I am now, there's a second one just appeared behind the first one from where I am. Roger, 544, just confirming that all the passengers can see this aircraft. I've got the island visual, it's dead ahead, can't say how far, probably 5 miles, but it's staying the same size. Looks to be off the northwest coast of Alderney.
A-line 544, Roger, would you like to send?
Please, I better go down, I think.
A-line 544, Roger, descend to altitude 2,000 feet, the QNH is 1021.
2,000 feet, 1021, it's very plain to see from where I am now, without any binoculars.
Were you scared?
I wasn't too happy, put it that way. I was quite glad to get on the ground and have a cup of tea.
We flew to Guernsey, an island off the northwest coast of France, to get some first-hand testimony where the sighting took place. Here, we met with Captain Ray Bowyer and 2 of his passengers.
We're travelling back from Southampton to Alderney in a Trilender. I had noticed Ray looking out through the windscreen with his binoculars, which is quite unusual.
I saw Ray turn around and talk to someone behind him while we were flying. Now, it wasn't worrying from the standpoint of flying, but it was unusual. And he was gesturing to something down below.
On nearing the object, a second identical shape appeared beyond the first. Both objects were of a flattened disc shape with a dark area to the right. They were brilliant yellow with light emanating from within, and I estimated them to be up to possibly a mile across.
I pointed it out to John. He had to lean across me to be able to see it.
It was like that.
This was a big object in the sky, very, very big object. and I didn't want to be too close to it. So it was at that time anyway where we had to descend to land, and with both objects still visible and a lot of the passengers in the back of the aircraft, we descended through the 2,000-foot haze layer and lost sight of it.
So Ray, why didn't you bring this to the attention of your passengers? I mean, normally when a pilot sees something of interest, he says, if you look out to your left, you'll see...
Yeah, New York.
Right, you know what I mean?
It was a little bit far away from it. Well, it was, I didn't want to alarm anybody at that point. There again, as we got closer to these objects, there was no hiding it. They were just there.
I returned home from Guernsey to find a DVD sent to me from Salida, Colorado. Listen carefully to the 6-year-old girl who points out a UFO to her dad.
Dad, can a spaceship grow bigger like that? Huh? Huh?
Uh-huh.
It could.
I'm not sure what the sounds are, but the object reminds me of what Ray and his passengers described seeing.
It moved over that part of the sky there. It probably moved 500, it probably moved 100 miles in a matter of a second or two.
Two of these up there now, you know. You see that now? See that big one? See it going?
Last week, several people in Stephenville, Texas, a small rural town of about 15,000, 70 miles southwest of Fort Worth, witnessed what many are calling a UFO. James Fox, I know you've been probing this for a long time. We've never got an answer to this. Why do you think the Air Force doesn't want this out?
Well, I mean, what are they going to say? We don't know what's flying around in our airspace with impunity.
Why can't they say that?
I think that possibly could. I wish they would. If the Air Force is listening tonight, why don't you tell us the truth?
Well, I came in on Tuesday night, a week and a half ago, started down the driveway, and I looked back here to the southwest, just past the windmill. I'd say maybe 5 miles away, there was a real bright light came on. It was almost as bright as like a welding arc. One of the guys that was at my house that night called up and said that he wasn't coming back to my house until we got armed guards. And I said, why is that? He said, well, there was a UFO flew over your house Tuesday night. I said, I saw it.
I was so distracted by what I saw that you could have had a train go in front of me and I wouldn't probably heard it because I was so focused on these lights. But I do not remember hearing any noise at all whatsoever.
How would you describe the acceleration?
Probably the speed of light. And I tried keeping up with my binoculars and I couldn't.
This case, so far, qualifies for that 5%. The lack of sound, the speed of the object, and apparently the military's interest.
There were two jets coming from that direction this way, and I did hear the jets.
You know, we're used to seeing military aircraft in our skies here in this area. We're used to seeing, you know, the helicopters and the fighter jets and the C-130s, and I mean, we know what those look like.
By the way,
so,
when it comes to military aircraft, I am a trained observer, so.
Whatever that's supposed to mean.
Whatever that means, right? Why don't we take another break here? We're visiting with James Fox, filmmaker in town, doing research on the UFOs and interviews. We'll take a break. We're back right after this.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dublin.
In Dublin, the whole town showed up to discuss this sighting.
My name is Steve Hudgens. I'm senior field investigator for MUFON. We're down here to investigate this extraordinary event.
It was going so fast and it didn't make any noise. The lights seemed to be streaming and breaking around it.
Then 10 minutes later it came back by, and that's when it had the two military jets chasing it.
I've been a witness to this and give you all the information I can.
You don't want to come forward and say anything because they'll say, oh, they're an idiot, because I've thought that before until I saw this.
I guarantee you the jet, whoever's flying the jets, they had a visual on it.
It was incredible. I listened to many witnesses and then went to the editors of the local paper where this story first broke.
Headlines. I mean, these are all headlines.
Angela Joyner saw me on CNN the night before and assumed I had all the answers.
Major Carl Lewis at Carswell, I've talked to him a lot, and he said something of this size would leave a sonic footprint much like what we know as a tornado path. It would just demolish things on the ground. Why don't we see that?
I have no idea.
That's a good answer.
Angela and local radio station Mandatory FM introduced me to Ricky Sorrells. We had a drink at the local bar where he agreed to meet with me the following day.
All these aircraft in the area, they wouldn't normally be flying.
They told me that Ricky had seen a lot more than lights in the sky.
Hey, we close that door, kiddo. I used to think that people that saw this and came on camera and said this kind of stuff, I thought, man, these guys need some help, you know? But it happened to me, and I can't change that. I had a hard time dealing with it, but...
So you looked out all the way in that direction, you didn't see the edge? Looking up, Ricky said he could not see the edge of the craft in any direction.
You couldn't see the edge of it?
Couldn't see the edge of it. But I do know this, it's bigger. You could have landed an airplane on that, I believe.
God, it's an incredible story.
Nothing, no sound, no when it was hovering, nothing when it moved from left to right, and nothing when it took off. And
holding his rifle and sometimes actually looking through his scope, Ricky stood under the craft for about 3 minutes.
I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but
no, I certainly haven't.
I've been in it only very few times in my life, but I had to slow my mind down to actually think about what to do with it, the information that I was receiving for the first time. And that's what I did. I studied it. You know, I seen no nuts, bolts, rivets, seams, no welds, none of this. It looked like a piece of sheet metal. You know, it wasn't shiny. It was a dull, I don't know what you call it, matte finish maybe. And this is what I had a hard time with, was if something was to leave, in my mind, it should pivot up and go, like an airplane would. Yeah. This did not do that. This stayed completely flat, and it went at a 45-degree angle away. And it took off at such a high rate of speed that no way I can describe it is if I would have blinked, I would have thought it just disappeared. I just want to know what it is. You know, why was it here? What was it? Is it ours? You know, that kind of thing.
Although the military initially denied being in the area, the official explanation from the Air Force is now a flight of F-16s. After each witness I meet, I find it increasingly difficult to accept the military's response.
I've actually stepped back and tried to view the big picture. I would like to find out what it is. And if people believe me, okay. If they don't, that's okay too.
Team
T-minus 15 seconds and counting.
Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper was the last American astronaut to go up in space alone. He orbited the planet 22 times. While stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in the early 1950s, Cooper was part of an event that has never been explained.
I was having some cameramen film the installation of a precision landing facility that we were putting in right on the edge of the dry lake. And this saucer flew right over him and put down 3 little gear and landed out on the dry lake bed. And they went out, picked up their cameras and moved on out toward him filming. And he lifted off, put the gear back in the well, and climbed out at a very high rate of speed and disappeared. By the time they got back with the developed film, I was on the higher and higher and higher level officer talking to me. Finally with the colonel telling me to, when the film arrived at my desk, to put it in the carrier pouch. There would be a courier there at my office by that time already, and they'd arranged for him to fly in our base airplane back to Washington with these films, and do not run prints, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you watch the film?
We didn't have a chance to run it. I had a chance to hold it up to the window and look at it. It was certainly a good film.
Did you ever keep in touch with anybody about it or discuss it?
How would I keep in touch with anybody about it? There's no way within the military or within the government of keeping track of something that is classified unless you're directly involved in it, and I was not.
This meeting was a turning point for my father. Gordon Cooper was an icon of his generation, and my father was amazed by his story.
At that point in time, there was no doubt in my mind that this vehicle was made at some other place than here on Earth.
That must have been extraordinary.
Yeah, well, Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon coming true.
After the film was sent to Washington, it was never seen or heard of again. Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell was the 6th man to walk on the moon. He has met with people in military and government positions from several countries who have privately shared with him information about UFOs.
Seem to be well-documented events that represent flying craft that do not match anything we have in an earthbound arsenal.
I felt that Dr. Mitchell would know the reasons for secrecy.
Why are we stonewalled?
I can't answer that question. I think it's long past time to open this up to the public. But the best answer is probably because they don't know what to do about it anyhow.
My father and I caught up with President Carter at a book signing in San Francisco.
What happened to the UFO issue?
What happened to
The UFO issue.
I don't really know what happened to it. I saw one, but I don't know what, it just disappeared.
Did you ask when you were president? What he said?
Yes, but there's a lot of different answers, and nobody has proof of things.
The question of secrecy has puzzled me for years. I asked the panelists in D.C. to offer possible explanations.
When there are witnesses or sightings coming in, they are very reluctant to pick up the issue, to investigate, because they have no structure and they don't know how to handle it.
Si existe una amenaza de origen desconocido que no tiene explicación, eso podría amenazar este sistema de conservación de poder.
The public opinion, I think, is asking for information and is ready to believe that there is something serious. If we can convince the government, it could change. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jean-Claude Ribes, and I am an astronomer working for the French Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique from 1963 to 1998. I contributed to the French Cometa report, a 3-year military study on UFOs and national security, released in 1999.
Cometa translates as Committee for In-Depth Studies. It was, in essence, a high-level think tank. Cometa included such members as 4-star General Bernard Norlin, who was the former commander of the French Tactical Air Force and military counselor to the Prime Minister, as well as André Lebeau, former president of the National Center for Space Studies, and General Bruno Lemoyne of the French Air Force. The Comedic Group published its findings in an historical 90-page report titled UFOs in Defense: What Should We Prepare For? The formation of the Comedic Group was initiated by French Air Force General Denis Letty. Comedic concluded that about 5% of the cases studied were inexplicable and that the best explanation was what the authors called the extraterrestrial hypothesis. With investigative journalist Leslie Kane, I flew to France to meet General Letty. We met the general at his home on the outskirts of Paris. We went over some of the more puzzling encounters that led the group to their conclusions.
And he saw the disc hovering.
Pilot sightings confirmed by radar.
Going very quickly out of his sight.
And cases involving soil and plant analysis from landing sites. I had looked into one of these cases myself. Farmer Renato Nicolai from Trans-en-Provence reported that a disc-shaped object landed in his garden in the late afternoon.
La forme, c'était comme si on posait deux assiettes, l'une sur l'autre.
When he told his wife, she assumed he had heat stroke and had hallucinated. However, scientific analysis of the landing site showed high levels of radiation, and when I visited the site back in 1999, almost 20 years later, nothing had grown in that spot. The town of Trans-en-Provence labeled the farmer a flying saucer fanatic.
Je peux pas dire que c'était une soucoupe volante, que c'était... J'ai vu quelque chose.
Oui.
Il s'est posé, il est reparti.
What we're looking at? I mean, what is this photograph?
General Letty also shared with us some impressive photographic cases. One of these was featured on the cover of the Cometa report.
So it's mapping? Is it mapping the ground? Mapping the ground?
A mapping plane from the government of Costa Rica was flying at 10,000 feet. It had a high-resolution camera running automatically under the fuselage, taking a picture every 17 seconds. On one of the frames, this object was captured. After careful analysis by several scientists, including Richard Haynes and Jacques Vallée, it was determined that the object captured on film was a real three-dimensional airborne object.
So do you think if it was announced that people would panic? If the government's announced, well, the unidentified objects are real?
I cannot say yes, but I cannot say no.
I asked the general to explain the Cometa report's extraterrestrial hypothesis.
For us, we think that the best explanation is that object came from outside. We don't say they come from outside, but the best explanation is that's the hypothesis.
In 2007, an investigative branch of CNES, the French equivalent of NASA, made 1,600 sightings spanning 5 decades available to the public. I asked CNES for an interview. I wanted to know who allowed the release of these files and why.
C'est le président du Centre national d'études spatiales, quand il a décidé de remettre en route l'activité du GEPAN, de réorganiser, qui a donné comme mission de travailler de façon transparente vis-à-vis du public et des médias.
We reviewed several extraordinary cases. Some even involved landings. I asked him what his personal beliefs were.
Je crois que probablement nous découvrirons dans le futur que peut-être il y a de tout et que certains cas sont peut-être des visites extraterrestres, mais d'autres cas seront probablement des observations naturelles qu'on n'arrive pas encore à expliquer aujourd'hui.
Et ça, c'est grand comme histoire.
C'est grande histoire, oui. C'est un grand projet. Big job. Huge job.
I wanted to know how releasing this information might have affected the people of France. We took to the streets.
Je vois un ovni, vous croyez tout de suite qu'il est fou?
Non, je pense qu'il doit y avoir des...
Sorry, guys. I had to stop it there, just because we have a broadcast deal in the works right now, and I don't know if I'm pushing the envelope as to whether or not I can even do this. So I have to play it cool, and I can't show you guys the whole thing. So, but yeah. So, but anyway, if you guys do you guys want to? Should we talk a little bit? We have a little bit of time.
Sure.
You.
Radiation. That's pretty interesting. Any information about that or theories?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole section on that in the film. I actually went. There was a landing case that happened in Bentwaters, England, in 1980. You talk about radiation background from the craft, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a landing case that happened, and funny enough, I cover a major landing case in this film, and the most elaborate production on Bentwaters. It's a great case in here. And while we were in 2007, when we did the National Press Club event, a bunch of the witnesses from that event were at the National Press Club, and then the guy who investigated the case for the British government was there as well. And they got together talking over dinner, and he's like, well, didn't you see the documents that came out about how you guys were exposed to 10 or 15 times radiation level readings, and that it's really, deleterious to your health and all this other stuff? He's like, that's news to me. I mean, my government, so they started a lawsuit, so they're actually suing the U.S. government for withholding that information from the guys that were subjected to this on the ground. But the reports came out from the MOD, documented proof that we have in the film that the ground radiation readings were like 10, 15 times higher, maybe even more, but it was like 10 or 15 times greater. Yeah, and that was like a day or so later. So, yeah. Sorry, I'll get to you in a second. Gentleman in the blue shirt.
So where's your road right now? What are you going to do with this now?
We quite honestly, I was kind of holding out for a distribution deal for theatrical release worldwide. But I have investors to pay back, and it's taken a lot longer than we expected, like almost 2 years longer than we expected. And although I'm willing to kind of ride it out, we got a pretty good offer from A&E, and it was a good offer, pay the investors back, and that would give us, we'd maintain home video distribution rights, and then we'd have full rights internationally. So we pay everybody back, we have the film again, and we can go out, take our time, and do some distribution and broadcast for worldwide. But then also I can enter in film festivals and do that circuit as well. So it's probably not going to end up in theaters, but it will get worldwide distribution. And a lot of people tell me it'll probably be seen by more people this way. So that's what's happening right now, and it's all going down like really quickly, actually. We've got a month to go.
On the Stephenville case,
yeah.
I was wondering if you had any more information about like where those all those multiple sightings are, like something like 40 miles from George Bush's ranch.
Exactly, yeah.
Some of them went over there and
yeah.
went into the no-fly zone and
yep.
came out, and
yeah.
what happened
There's
there?
There's radar reports that came out finally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny, that this guy that stood under that craft. When I was in Stephenville when this was all going down, like a day later, we got there. We got to the town hall meeting, and the Air Force first said, they knew nothing, and then it was like, oh, well, it was a bunch of F-16s. And meanwhile, we were on Larry King the night before, and so the town knew who I was when I got there the next day, which was great because it gave me access to all the witnesses. So I was hunting down some of the best witnesses, and while I was doing an off-camera interview with this guy, the guy that stood under the craft, you guys remember that guy? He lives off the beaten path, off the grid, he was like shaking in his boots. He was really scared. He was being harassed. And like a FedEx truck showed up and said, whoops, we got the wrong address. And they were flying helicopters over his place at night and harassing him. And
Why?
because they said, here's what this happened when I was there. And they said, he said, you stop flying helicopters over the guy's apparently response from the local Air Force base is, first of all, it's not your airspace, it's ours. And secondly, I suggest you stop talking about what you saw. It's exactly what they said to him. So he just clammed up and he was done. So I said, look, I really find your story compelling. I would love to get you on camera. He's like, I'm not talking, I'm done. So that was it. I got to his property, I met him, I had the camera crew there, I had all the cameras ready. 3 months later, he called me up and he's like, I'm ready to come forward. So I jumped on an airplane, flew to Texas, re-edited the thing, put him in. But in any case, and then some radar reports came out that the object was like right over restricted airspace over President Bush's ranch. Heading in that direction. I know. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the National Press Conference that Dr. Stephen Greer held in like
2001, yeah.
2001, yeah. So I'm curious about, when I saw that 3 or 4 years ago, it blew me away. Incredible witnesses, what they said they were going to do, and how they were going to testify under oath. They'd be willing to testify under oath to the grand jury and all that. And when I saw your bio or the flyer for this, it intrigued me about another press conference which happened in 2007. What's going on? I mean, there's just so much information out there, and these incredible witnesses and all that. Do you ever work with Dr. Greer, or do you guys collaborate on stuff? Is it an effort to get the information out, or is it just putting meetings out and videos? I love what you're doing, don't get me wrong.
Oh, thanks. No. Well, the neat thing about what we did in 2007 is, and I planned this the whole time, is I documented it on HD, high definition, with a professional camera crew, the entire event over a 4-day period. I took all the witnesses aside, interviews in Washington. We documented the event itself. So it did get publicity, not a whole lot, but it got Anderson Cooper, it got Larry King, it got a lot of local stuff, Good Morning America, Fox News, whatever. And it's like kind of the flavor of the day or the week or whatever, and it got some coverage. But we documented the event and made a film out of it. So my whole theory was, yes, it's going to cost a lot of money for something that's going to fizzle out in the mainstream news after a week, but we've got this documented forever in this movie. So I hope that because I know that Dr. Greer did that effort. I don't think he did that. He didn't. He was sort of banking more on the media picking the ball up and running with it, and they didn't really. Go figure, but but at least we documented it as well, and made a whole film out of it. So those who missed it or never even heard about it, hopefully will soon.
Was it a webcast? Because I know that the Greers had incredibly high web attendance.
Did the?
Do you know?
I heard the web went down, crashed in the middle of it or something.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
was ours webcast? I don't think so. I think they gave us the option to do that, but I don't think we did it since we're no. Any more questions? Yep. Yeah.
If you know Leopard Stone,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't seen the rest of the building, obviously, but have you ever thought about having witnesses like that who come forward from years of working on top secret military projects?
I've got them both in older films.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen those.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But yeah, because those are two pretty credible witnesses who actually have firsthand experience in many crash retrievals and top secret.
But have you noticed in this film we don't cover any close encounters of the third kind? We don't cover crash retrievals. We don't even mention Area 51 because we feel like that's kind of been there, done that, and we're trying to maintain this I keep repeating myself and I sound like a broken record, but we really do try to maintain a very, very conservative position on this whole thing. About as far as you'll see it go is where you just saw it went. And towards the end, one of our conclusions is, look, it's either all terrestrial activity, in which case that's a huge story because someone's in possession of this revolutionary technology that has the ability to do all these things, or it's not. And if it's not, then we're not alone. It's very simple. But, so.
I was wondering if you had been considering
doing anything at some time with the Gary McKinnon case? Because he put all the stuff on the website that he got out of all those military hat jobs he did and stuff, and about, you know, that we have this extra legal anti-gravitic space force that's already flying around the solar system, and that, you know, you may know that Dr. Richard Boylan in Sacramento has put on his website information from an insider who describes what these crafts are called CRW something or other, and this and that. So I think that's a really hot story at some point in time. If he gets extradited over here, or he doesn't, or whatever.
You know, I got a phone call, you guys, in the late '90s from this guy Chuck Clark, and I'm just going to say this on the record. What the heck? But again, I get this phone call, and he was based out. He's a civilian, retired Air Force. I think he was retired Air Force. He was definitely military. I wasn't sure if it was Air Force or Army. But he calls me up, and I've been friends with him. I'd been out to Area 51 a number of times for a previous film I was working on, and he said, "I've got something you've got to see." And I was like, "What is it?" And he's like, "I got some video footage that I just got my hands on, and you've got to see it. You might have seen it. Did you ever see that footage?" So he calls me, so I drop everything I'm doing, jump in my car, drive to Area 51, the outskirts of Area 51, and he pops his tape in for me. And it's two guys from LA, and this relates to what you're saying, so I'm getting to it in a second here. It's two guys from LA, and they're having the quintessential little trip out to Area 51, the extraterrestrial highway, and they're jumping out of the car and like, "Hey Bob, check this little sign out, and here's the alien, isn't this cool?" And they're posing next to the aliens and little saucers and just giggling and listening to music. And then all of a sudden it gets real serious, and it's like dusk, and they're both huddled down inside the car on the side of the road, parked, screaming at each other. "Get down, get down." And then you see this, and I saw this with my own eyes, okay? You see this, like, the shadows on the inside of the car are eerily kind of, like the source of light is kind of rocking or something, because all the shadows are eerily, I'd never seen anything quite like it, the inside of the car. And this light was really bright on the dashboard, but it was kind of on the sides as well. It almost reminded me like Close Encounters, you know? And look at it, and they're arguing, and there's a young guy who's like 18, another guy who's like probably 30, and the 18-year-old's like, "I'm going outside to film this thing." And the other guy's going, "Stay in the car, stay in the car." And the door opens, and he goes outside, and I swear to you, I saw this with my own eyes. The camera pans from the ground up, and it's dusk. But it's still twilight, but it's dusk. The camera pans up, and they're hovering in the sky like a top. So beautiful. It was so incredible. It was this perfect disc. And it was taking up probably about half the screen, maybe a little less. Big, okay? Detailed. And it's just wobbling like this. And it's like there's no source of light on it. It's like the whole thing is kind of glowing like phosphorus. Have you ever seen phosphorus? That's what it looked like. It looked like the whole thing was just glowing. And the guy who's filming it just goes, and I'm thinking the same thing when I'm looking at it. He goes, "Oh my God." Just like that, right? And then it films for a beat longer, and then the film cuts off. Yeah, and this is this is restricted airspace out at so-called Area 51 or whatever. That's where these guys were. So it certainly, you know, to me, seems plausible that thing was, first of all, it's the most impressive footage I've ever seen, because there were points of reference, and it was amazing. That the military were A, aware of it, and B, it was probably something that they had in their possession. That was just my speculation, but that's what it, do you know what I mean? Because of where it was really low to the ground, too. And maybe they're having a little fun with these guys, you know? A couple kids in the middle of nowhere, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I tried to get that footage for so long. I never got to manage to get my hands on it. But any other questions?
So let's imagine that in our lifetimes there is communication, not just visuals, but real communication. Have you ever envisaged how you would like that to pan out?
I think start shooting. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm totally kidding. What is our military? The protocol is shoot first, then ask questions, you know? I mean, there's so many cases I've met with military guys that we're so hostile. We shoot at these things all the time. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating totally, but if I were them, I'd be, I don't know, the way we're very violent, and they're probably wondering how, maybe they don't even want to. Maybe they consider us kindergartners, or you know. Right, there's lots of claims. So I don't know on a massive scale. I wouldn't even begin to speculate how that would be done. I don't know. I don't know.
For those that have evolved that level of consciousness, and for those that have not been able to open their minds to the degree to communicate with those planes, then they don't communicate with those people because they can't. I'm not saying they're not trying, but generally they have emissaries, so to speak.
Well, I get asked the question all the time, like, why don't they just? I mean, all they'd have to do is land on the White House lawn, or, you know, the Macy's parade or something, and that would put an end to it. And they don't. But there are massive sightings that have happened. I mean, Hudson Valley and Phoenix, and I don't know. It must be lots of different agendas. I really don't know. I don't know.
They're messing with our minds.
Right.
What would you do if you had $1 million?
I'm sorry?
What would you do if you had $1 million?
I would. That's an interesting question, actually. One of the things I'd like to do, and the sale of this will free me up to possibly do something like this. And we're going to do a whole new series of promotion for this, for A&E when this thing comes out. But what I personally would like to do is do a multi-city tour internationally and have a panel of generals and colonels and admirals, whatever, along with me, and have selected screenings with the media and have Q&A sessions at the end of it, but do it in multiple cities and just get lots of, and internationally, and really force the government's hand in the U.S., because lots of other governments are pushing for transparency right now, and that's been happening in the last few years. And I think if we could do that on an international level, I think that would on very, very credible, selected screenings, invite media only, have Q&A at the end of it with the military witnesses, and do that in cities all across the world. I think that would be, that's what I'd like to do. Yeah. I'd like to push for congressional hearings too. I really would. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you hear recently, I think it's sometime in the last week or so, that Brazil actually opened up their files?
Yeah, it's been happening all over. It's been happening all over. We had some people from, yeah, it's been happening all over. So I can't even keep up with it. And it gets a little bit of attention. I mean, the fact that France opens up their files, 60 years of investigations. And I basically say to the guy who's head of CNES, on camera, I was like, hey, well, what do we have here? He's like, well, we got some explainable stuff, we got this, and we probably have some extraterrestrial activity going on. I was like, whoa, that's big, you know? And it got a flash in the pan, international attention. And yeah, it's just amazing. It's amazing that it didn't get more, what's happening. But I think it's baby steps.
You also aware, I think it was sometime earlier last year, 2008, that the Vatican actually put out a letter. Did you hear about that?
Heard about that too, yeah.
Expound on that a little bit. I was trying to tell somebody about that today.
Well, basically that it's not, that from what I understand, that God created everything in the universe. It's not possible that extraterrestrials could be part of the bigger picture, something like this. Yeah, that's been going on for a while, Any other questions?
Now, by the end of the film, do you have any kind of hypothesis?
I do.
About why? No, but I mean about why the government is not.
Well, we do. We kind of hint at that throughout the whole movie. We do, and that is addressed throughout the whole film. I kind of take jabs, yeah, definitely, but it's control, based from, yes.
So you've spoken with many of the military, whatever they are. Do the majority of these people actually think that anything that we would have on the earth could harm these vehicles or protect us from that? I mean, isn't that kind of like a wrist rocket against an F-16? I mean, they would maybe shoot at these?
I know, it's pretty funny that they would even try, right, to do this.
Isn't it sort of absurd if they wanted to conquer us and
Yeah.
as they would have done it?
It's amazing that, I mean, yeah, it goes back to that guy getting pulled out of the F-16. He was ordered to go scramble and intercept this thing, and, he couldn't even walk when he got near. The technology is so advanced from anything that apparently that we've got. All right.
I just love the title of the movie.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there's kind of a story behind it.
Yeah, there is a story behind
I'd
that.
love to hear it.
Yeah, because initially it was Beyond the Blue, and I didn't like that title, but I had to call it something. And so I called it Beyond the Blue for a while, but I said, nah, I'm not going to, the right name's going to come. And then I'm in the editing room, and I kept hearing this, don't tell me what I saw. I know what I saw. And I thought, well, I know what I saw. You know, I kind of bounced it around a little bit, showed some friends. I was like, yeah, I like that. It sounds a little, the only complaint I've gotten is it sounds like those horror movies. I know what you did last summer or something. You know? But oh well, we're going to, you know, hopefully get this out. So, but I do, that's interesting that the film didn't have a title for the longest time.
Yeah, it's a good title, and I actually noticed that people, even in the clips you said this, I heard people say it
Yeah,
at least 3 times.
I heard it so many times from so many, because of course people see things and they say, oh, you didn't see that, this is what you saw. And it's like, no, I didn't, I know what I saw, don't tell me what I saw. You know, so yeah, I'm really glad you like that, I like that too, yeah.
The new energy, 0 point, over gravity, over unity, whatever, from the void. That aspect, I think, is the real reason for keeping the secret. And the government has their own way of utilizing, by back engineering, the energy, the whole concept. It really does blow everything open. And yeah, the relationship to the universe and the powers that are there for us to tap into. And so what are you doing about I thought that maybe the energy aspect was another earlier interest. Is there something that you'll eventually, like this could be the gateway drug? This could be the thing that people will go, oh, well, maybe, and maybe, oh yeah, retrieve that memory. Yeah, I remember. And then get it.
Mm-hmm.
Get it. Get the whole problem is that the governments don't want us to know what we're capable of. If the aliens can do it, we can too. That's what it's really, I think, the refusal to disclose.
Well, what I'm willing to talk about off the record is a little different than what I talk about on the record. And there's a camera on me right now, so. Anybody?
Well, it could also be, you know, that maybe these energies that come to our planet, they balance things. They, like the crop circles, you know, the seeds are stronger. They are all under waterways that go all over the oceans. It could be that they actually come to places that are in high danger, and they just cleanse them or clear them. We don't even always have to see it as bad, you know, when something new but that we don't understand comes. Maybe we can form like an inner alliance with these beings that we don't see, but super sensibly they're definitely there.
It's interesting. A lot of the cases I feature in Out of the Blue, nuclear, tipped missiles, Minuteman missiles, cases where these unidentified objects are seen and disable, Atlas rockets or Minuteman missiles, stuff like that. And there's definitely a correlation there. And even Bentwaters, England, 1980, they were shooting beams of light. These objects were shooting beams of light down into very sensitive weapons storage areas, according to them. None of the military officers I interviewed could actually say that on camera. You can't talk about the fact that we had nuclear weapons in England during the Cold War, but they use the word, we had really sensitive weapons storage area where they were shooting beams of light down into. It's almost like taking the matches out of the hands of a baby or something, So that's definitely an interesting angle. But yes.
I think you should make a big sign like the Hollywood sign, and say like, come on down and have a cup of coffee that big, and put a card table with a couple chairs. These guys can fly over and you sit over there and say, come on down.
I'll tell you guys really quickly, when I met with Gordon Cooper, Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper, we talked a little bit behind the scenes, and he's like, well, if they come down and land and offer me a little ride or something, I'd, certainly take him up on it, But can you imagine his position? I don't know if it was in this piece. It certainly is in Out of the Blue, but I asked him if he ever followed up on the footage that he handed over to some government agency, okay? And there it was, hard evidence, landing, broad daylight, saucer on the ground, that he saw. He held the film up and handed it over, and the evidence is gone forever. You know, can you imagine how that must, and it really triggered a kind of response with him, you know, that would kind of piss him off a little, I would imagine. Handed over and never seen or heard from ever again. You know what's really interesting? I'll tell you really quickly. I was editing this film for somebody else down in San Diego just a little while ago. And it was an elderly woman, and she said, "What do you do, you know, on the side, whatever?" And I said, "Well, I'm just doing this." I was expecting her to start laughing, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you know, I had this college roommate. His name was blah, 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 Twining, Twixie Twining, or Dixie Twining or something." I said, "You mean Nathan Twining's son?" She said, "Yeah." And he told me back in the late 50s about this tour he had, you know, going down through the vault at the Pentagon. And he showed me all, and he got to see all these film clips and movies and photographs and stuff from UFOs. So there's a vault somewhere. That stuff went somewhere, not in our hands. We have 3 minutes. You guys, anybody have any more questions or?
Well, what if it's just, we're moving towards something anyway, so this is sort of a way to almost put us at ease by becoming more and more frequent. You know, at the beginning, they're going to make fun of people because it's one guy named Bubba, you know, shouting about it. But now that more and more people are becoming aware of it, we are possibly becoming more and more okay with it. So if anything does exchange, we're just working towards that, you know, in a non-militaristic way. Who's to say that the military or the bigwigs that won't let it out aren't them? You know?
You mean Barack Obama's an alien?
Obama hasn't been here as long as I've been here. I'm talking about way back.
Did you have one more question?
Yeah, I guess it's not really a question, but like, what's your opinion on UFOs in Hollywood? Like, the movies that come out about these things, or, you know, is there, you know, it's about the media, you know, like people being exposed, you know, exactly what you just said, about how getting the word out on a massive scale. Just like with your movies, you know, or this new movie that's coming out, District 9. Have you heard of that movie? I guess just what's your opinion on those types of movies? It's not really a question, I guess.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. My objective has just been to create something real and not science fiction or interpret it as science fiction. I mean, look at Close Encounters. Close Encounters is very entertaining. Most people don't know that Hynek has a cameo appearance in Close Encounters, and that most of the cases, not all, but most of them were based on real life stories out of Project Blue Book files. People didn't know that. But my whole objective was to create real testimonies that can be entertaining and yet informative, and get it out to the masses. So, I mean, you know, because a lot of it else is kind of considered science fiction. Yeah, no, yeah. Really giving that one a whole lot of thought. I guess we should, one more question.
I think you bring out that the presidents of the United States have been kind of kept in the dark about this. Is there anyone that you might know of in the Obama administration who would be open to this material if they got a little bit involved in it?
I can't talk about this with the camera rolling. I'd be happy to talk about it if you guys want to turn the cameras off. Yeah.
Let's wrap it up then.
Okay, well anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.